Okay, so next up, we have a panel discussion. So panelists, please come down. Okay, that's everyone, good. And we'll get started here in just a minute. Oh, and Miron, you have slides to begin, right? Yeah. Okay, you want to get those ready? Read this.
No, you can.
Yeah,
That's fine.
if you like.
Yeah, I can just give it there.
Then both will be for you, so.
Okay, who cares about it? Okay. So, good morning again, and it's hard to follow the last slide of Kevin but I think that at some level the panel is a perfect continuation of the last comments that came from Washington, and so it's an opportunity that was driven by the fact that Manish came to medicine for the first time in his life. So and I said I cannot miss this opportunity, and we are all about leverage and opportunities and scavenging. So that's what led to this panel. So the reason why Manish is a key factor in all this is this paper that he and David Abramson from The World Under published in 2019 that really helped definitely us here, as Kevin calls it, in this zip code, to sort of formulate and organize in our heads what we have been doing for quite a while. And we can talk more about it, but it's not really about us. So this paper followed with a special issue, and I hope that the panel will have an opportunity to discuss some of the aspects of why they published it, why was a special issue. Now, our take at CHTC, sort of between Brian and myself, is to summarize the paper with this terminology. I mean, the key terminology there is the laboratory, the locale, and the communities that comes from the paper, and we put a little bit additional, cheese flavor to the paper. And that is today the way we articulate and we present. And you may even hear some of it from Ramsey at the celebration in the afternoon about the school and maybe the college that is following here on the campus, where this concept of translational is becoming more, I don't know, it's sinking in at some level. And I'm sure that the panel will talk about the challenges of doing this in the world of computer science. But since I have the opportunity, although I told the panelists no slides, but I can do whatever I want. So I added a couple of slides that I couldn't cover yesterday, but I feel that they are relevant. So we talk about the fact that in order to get the translational process, we need communities. We can talk about it, we can intend to do it. Hi, Peter, I didn't realize that you are here. And then how do we deal with the community? So yesterday I was able to talk about the trust. I would like to focus a little bit about the value proposition. And I think I managed to show this slide, and Brian also showed it about the OSDF. It's how do you communicate value proposition, right? And we can argue here whether this is the right value proposition, but you see the value proposition has no numbers and it is a message that when you talk to decision makers, how do you communicate in a clear way? What do you bring to the table? What can I do for you? How does it, and is it good, bad, or indifferent? We can talk about it later. And what I would like to leave with you in general, and maybe for the panel also, is sort of a list of what is, how do we communicate value? How do we create the message? How do we understand? And at some level, you heard it from Kevin's presentation, that all this work on the web interfaces that I must admit, Kevin has been giving me a hard time for a long time, and Manish knows it when he was telling Kevin to give me a hard time, is how do we communicate our value? And the way that Kevin or NSF can look at all this information and having it live, what happened. And by the way, I don't know, where's Canon? Why is it still stuck on May 27? No, when I came to do mine, it was also May 27. Check it. And then there is definitely the question of how do you quantify things. And here's one way that we make an attempt to communicate value. And these are the spotlights. These are the stories that we are telling. Is it effective? Is it building communities? Is it is that worthwhile, or is that just keeping some of the bean counters happy? And the last thing is just to point out something about publications, again, for the fun. So we have the key publication of the OSG with whatever, 900 citation. And the trend I find to be interesting so is it that we are doing a better job in forcing people to create citation? And the other one is the paper by Doug, Todd, and I don't know who, the experience paper of Condor. And you can see that it levels off. It has more. It has almost 3,000 citation, but it behaves. So is that a way to communicate value? Is how, so that's the slides. And now we are ready for the question. But before that, I would like, starting with Doug, a quick introduction of why did I pick you as a victim? So I'm Doug Thain from microphone.
Used to being loud. No, sorry. I'm Doug Thain from the University of Notre Dame. I direct a group called the Cooperative Computing Lab, and we design software for workflows and structuring applications that can run on top of HT Condor as well as other campus facilities. So we're also funded through NSF CSSI programs, and we have a similar interest in building software, not just doing the technical innovation, but making a product that people can use and having an impact on science. Is that enough of an introduction? I got some slides if you want.
Oh. Doug, you know better.
Yeah.
Peter Couvares. I work at Caltech for the LIGO laboratory. LIGO is an astrophysics experiment to detect gravitational waves as a means to learn more about the universe and cosmology and astrophysics. And LIGO is very data intensive and data analysis intensive project, and has been a major Condor user for almost 25 years now, and OSG. And I've gone between the Condor project and LIGO with other stops in between, and so I've had sort of a long history as both being to blame for Condor and being a victim of Condor on the other sides.
Manish Parashar from the University of Utah. I direct the Scientific Computing and Imaging Institute there, which is a translational institute in a way. Had multiple relationships with Miron and the HTC, Condor, and PAT teams and Pelican teams over the years, most recently as part of the National Data Platform Project, which is working very closely with Pelican and OSG.
I'm Ewa Deelman from the University of Southern California. I'm a research professor in computer science and also a research director at the USC Information Science Institute. I started working with Miron in December of 2000, and we've been developing technologies to support scientific workflows at scale. So in particular, I've been, and my team and Matt's range is here in the audience as well. We've been working on the Pegasus workflow management system that uses DAGMAN and the HT Condor infrastructure underneath. And also Matt's provides user support and facilitation in OSG, and you saw his face yesterday on the screen. So thank you.
So I'm Brian Bockelman, and prepping some slides for later today. I think I've been bothering this group of people something close to 20 years. But I think I'm up here this morning because of all the distinguished folks here. I'm representing one of the newer projects. So if you talk about communities take 10 plus years to build, Pelican's about to turn 2. So I think I'm wearing the perspective of what does it mean to be at the very beginning of that cycle.
Okay, we have here quite a spectrum, but let's start from the beginning. Manish, why did you write this paper? Why did you bother us?
Okay, well, so if I'm to be blamed for this panel, I would sort of indirectly blame you for the paper, right? So I was a grad student, and there was this really cool piece of software that someone had developed called Condor that allowed me to steal cycles from my fellow lab mates' Sun workstations, right? So it got hooked on to building systems, and that sort of became part of my career research profile. Been building software and doing translation along with research throughout my career, but discovered and that you really had to have 2 lives, right? You had to do what your tenure committee needed, and then do stuff that you really enjoy doing, right? So you're this closet translationist. And right, that progressed, and I think, spent some time at NSF and figured that it is really hard to get, translation recognized in more traditional academic units, right? So kept pushing that till we were at this informal conference in the chateau in Paris or in France, outside Lyon, actually, and it was all work. And we were talking about it, and there were a bunch of people brainstorming, and we figured out this was a common thread, right? What I had experienced was not unique, right? Everybody there enjoyed doing that, talking about it, right? But had this trouble getting recognition, funding it, getting people to do it, publishing it. And so the wine had nothing to do with it, but David and I started talking, and one thing led to another. And before we knew it, we had an outline of a paper, right? And that led to it. I will add one more plug that since the paper, what we've been trying to do is collecting stories, short stories about people who have successfully translated things and not focused on what, but how did you do it, right? How did you overcome it? How did you get the recognition? How did you implement things? How do you get the community to use it? And the reason is to collect something that we can then highlight the importance of the process, but also becoming a template for others to follow as they get into this path of adding translation to their research. So if you have great stories, please let me know. Back to you.
Thank you, Manish. You then moved ahead and created a special issue and invited Ewa to write a paper. How easy or difficult was it to map the Pegasus work to the paper?
For me or forever?
I think it was fairly easy. I think because at this time, so we're talking about 2019, 2020. So we've been around for quite a while, about 20 years at that point. So we've had a lot of experience in doing translational work. And for us, it really meant when, you talked about the kind of dual trajectories. For us, the trajectory was one is doing research. So I truly believe that to do translational computer science, you need to do research in computer science so that the translations that you're doing are relevant to the community and also move with the changes and the landscape of the research. So, for example, we looked at early on, we looked at issues of task clustering in the workflows to support workloads like LIGO, which had a huge number of different small tasks that needed to be executed. Same problems we saw in astronomy. Again, scientists had these workflows that had very short tasks that needed to be run on either HT Conjure infrastructures or high performance computing systems, and you just could not submit lots of little tasks into the systems. So the research was driven from the problems that we saw in the applications, but that was still computer science research. We evaluated things in the laboratory, so doing running a suite of benchmarks and applications, looking at where the particular algorithms worked well, where they didn't work well. And then only the things that we saw potential were translated then into the Pegasus software. We usually typically we work with the communities the friendly communities first. So we ask them to deploy and try out our software and see, how it performs for them in their environments. And then we do broader releases so others can use that as well. So I think we had that pipeline, kind of utilized without calling it translational computer science. So writing this paper was not too hard. Thanks.
Brian, you had to go through the same process with the CE.
Yeah, so we wrote a paper about what we did with the Condor CE. So the Condor CE is if you think of Condor as a software suite, this is one of the elements of the software suite. And what does it mean to I'm glad you pulled up the slide. What does it mean to go through this process end to end, right? I like to tease or joke about computer scientists that the life of a computer scientist is you come up with a great idea, you write a prototype, you do the prototype, you write the paper, you throw away everything, we'll wait for the next great idea. And we wanted to talk about what it meant to not just come up with a prototype, but take it all the way out into a community. And in fact, it's communities that really depend on, or where their science really depends on that to function long term, right? So without the Condor CE, if that stopped functioning for 3 months or 6 months, I'd say particularly the LHC is not going to be producing much science during those 3 or 6 months. So we wanted to talk about that experience. We wanted to point out the importance of this and kind of maybe give a long form example of how doing that process can be research in itself. We did not know what, in the end, what all the pieces of the CE would look like. We didn't know if we had gathered all the requirements from the community. We knew what we wanted to do at the beginning, but to bring it out over that 5-10 year scale, we knew that we needed this kind of critical feedback loop. So for us, it was really important to show it's not just coming up with the idea, putting out the software and reiterate, but that the value comes from that long term of going through the entire loop all the way out to the community.
So, and by the way, any other member of the panel, feel free to make your own, to speak. Even if I don't ask you a pointed question. But
Yeah.
yeah.
Can you hear me? Yeah. I want to talk a little bit about one of the slides talked about trust. And I think that that ultimately is kind of at the core of translational computer science, because just like what Brian said, most computer scientists actually would prefer a world in which there are no users. And it sounds like a joke, but it's true. It's why they go into computer science and not, a social science, is because they want control over the experiment, right? You implement your algorithm, you run it, you simulate it, you get your results. And the smart ones know that users are a necessary evil, right? That, well, we've got to engage with the users because we've got to get the data, or we've got to sell the thing, or we've got to, but what, and Miron knows this in his bones, which is that other people aren't stupid, right? Users can smell it when you're there for a transactional relationship, right? When you come and you have a good story about why you want to work with the users, but ultimately, you'd rather they not exist. They know that, and it doesn't lead to a relationship with trust and a relationship that's long term. And one of the things about the Condor team that allows it to do translational computer science, and the same is true of Ewa's group, and actually a very small number of research groups in computer science, is that the users aren't a necessary evil. They're really the whole point. I think a lot of people on the Condor team would get bored if there were no users. It's not that things would improve; it would actually sort of take away the interesting thing. And the interesting problems are always the ones that happen when you interface with users. And it actually, ultimately, most of the problems that I see in translational computer science, and that I see Path take on, and ISI and others, are ultimately social problems with sort of technological features. But a lot of the principles of Condor and a lot of the principles of OSG and a lot of the things that have made it successful are really some of the same problems that happen in the human world around law and society. I mean, it's amazing how often you see mappings between the sort of ugly, imperfect, inelegant things Condor has to do and what we have to do in the real world to solve problems. And it's really about mapping the human world to the technological world. And that's really at the core of translational computer science. And when you get a group or people who believe that and understand that, you trust them that they actually, you really do have a mutual interest in solving the human problem, the scientific domain problem. And it's not a computer scientist for whom you're an instrument to get a paper out. And I think that model of trust and problem solving is really at the core of what I see as what's interesting about translational computer science and what makes it different from just sort of applied computer science. If you can make a distinction between the two.
So Doug, how, as a computer scientist, faculty, coming in as an assistant, becoming tenured and all, getting tenured and all the kind of thing. How does doing translational affect the trajectory? I still remember that you guys at Notre Dame were using Condor to heat the greenhouses, right? To keep the temperature.
As far as I still know, there's still
They're still
thing happening there. Yeah,
they're still using turning on and off the machine.
I'll credit Paul Brenner with that, right? The city greenhouse was having a hard time paying their heating bills, right? And so the CRC sort of entered into a relationship. So we're going to put 2 racks of stuff there, and we'll pay the electricity bills to run the computers, and the computers will generate the heat, and then the plants will grow. And so that was sort of the darling of green IT.
And they use Condor to turn it on and off depending on something.
Yeah, there's a thermostat involved in there. Yeah.
So that is so. But what does it mean to be a faculty that's doing computer science? That's it. It's no impact. It makes it easier. It makes it more difficult.
Well, I think if you're careful, you can do both, right? So I've made a career publishing papers as well as software and having users, and I know everybody else here has done all those things, right? So I think there's plenty of evidence to show that it can be done. You had this, if you go back to that slide that had the cycle there, right? There's room in that first loop for publishing papers that do interesting things, but I do think that the way you get there is to set the goalposts in the right place, right? And the goalposts have to be, first make something that's useful and get it deployed and get a user happy, right? And then you write a paper about how you made that user happy because you solved interesting technical problems along the way.
But useful is the value proposition.
I'm sorry?
Useful is you have to articulate the value proposition.
Absolutely, right? So sometimes you have to be a little selective in what made the user happy versus what is interesting to the technical community. And sometimes those things overlap, and sometimes there's a little divergence between them, but I think you can do both of those things. I think something I've learned along the way is how to set the goalposts for students in the right way that get them to those interesting things. And one of my favorite things to do with a new student is actually related to what you talked about in terms of measuring to show the value. I'll say, look, we already have this complex system. It's generating all these logs. You have no idea what's in there. Make me a web page that visualizes everything and say what's going on there. And that project has never failed because, number one, it shows what the system is doing, right? And that has value to the people who are funding it, who are potential users or people looking over your shoulder on tenure committees. But without fail, that always serves to show you're doing something wrong. Something's broken. Something's not right. There's an ordering problem. And then that gives an opportunity for that student to go in and say, oh, there's a synchronization problem. Oh, well, I can solve that, and I can cite, Leslie Lamport, and I can write my paper, but then the goalposts are already built in, and that they have the visualization to show for their paper, right? And so there's a virtuous cycle there, right? So if you start with the measuring the outcome, the project sort of the challenge reveals itself. I guess the other part, which is about setting goalposts, is I no longer tell anybody get X to work. What I say is get X to work in a way that Todd can run it, right? Right, and it has to be that way, right? Because there's so many things that turn out to be, I got it to run on my laptop, and so I picked the port numbers and I installed it, and it's totally useless to anybody else, right? Until if the goal is give it to Peter to use, and you've succeeded when Peter can use it, then you're on the track to doing things in a translational way.
So I have one. How much time? 8 minutes. Okay, so let me address one thing and then open the floor, and worst case, we'll steal some time from the. We did talk about the locale. The locale is creating the service, and the service can be in the form of an OS pool. The service can be in the form of facilitation. The service can be in terms of supporting the software, the distribution and all that. And that usually is the part that consumes non-negligible amount of funding. So hopefully not putting Manish on the spot here is how easy it is from the funding agency perspective to fund the service.
So it depends, right? I think there are the mission agencies where it's a little easier to fund translational work, more foundational agencies which fund foundational research. I think it's more of a culture than any restriction in funding translation. There's nothing in the, for example, for NSF in the merit review criteria of intellectual and merit and broader impacts that prevents you from funding translational work, right? A proposal can be funded exclusively for its broader impacts, right? So there's nothing there, but it's the mindset of the panels that evaluated, the program directors as to what is innovative, right? And that's something I struggled with as a program director and throughout my time there is demonstrating that translational work is also innovative and sometimes more innovative because now you have to really make it work and really have an impact on the domain you're trying to have an impact, right? So it's this, but I'm optimistic moving forward, right? There's more and more, there may be a few things, right? There is emphasis on return on investment, on impact and measuring that. And without having translation as part of your mindset when you start your research, right? It's very hard to measure these things, right? And so translation, and the other thing maybe is that the distance between foundational research and societal use and impact is shortening. And especially with technologies, they're getting more and more deployed faster. So having that connection is more and more important. And so I think translation will continue to be more important and more recognized. So I remain optimistic.
I might jump in. So one thing I'd say or observing having done this for a bit is the services, the locale is distinct from kind of what I'd call a boring operational, just straight up production service. You know, we see this in the OS pool where we have to think somewhat rationally about how hard do we push on the newest version of Condor, the whatever Todd's team is cooking up, so to say, versus trying to keep things as stable as possible. And this is one of the interesting balancing acts because it's what we're trying to do is not kind of just a classic quote unquote boring network or something like that. And yes, I know networks are playing innovative as well, but it's not really well defined. And I think that's for me where some of the fun is. You know, it's never, if I had to place it in terms of what say NSF calls its different big computing purchases, we're almost always going to be like the Cat2 prototypes, right? Where, you know, where we are always changing slightly. We're always trying to improve it. We're always trying to do something different. It's never gets to the, you know, the OS pool will never get done. It will never get fully baked. We will always be pushing and trying to find where that, you know, how hard to press on the gas. I think is one of the interesting questions.
No, you're
absolutely services like this.
You're absolutely right. Right. Peter said this is a socio-technical problem, right? You're trying to balance how do we push the innovation in the science using the technology and push the technology to what science could be, right? So there's that feedback loop or that virtuous cycle that you're pushing, right? So you always have to think about the technical problem. What is the problem to solve and how to solve it, right? What can we do and how to do it? You're talking about the socio-technical problem, right? How are people going to use it? How are they going to engage with it? And increasingly, there's a third question you have to ask. Should I be doing it? Especially with AI and stuff, which is becoming more and more important. And now you have to bring these three things together. What should I do and how do I do it? how are people going to use it, and how is it going to be, how are they going to do what I'd like them to, and then should they be doing this, right? And so I think that makes it very interesting.
And another thing that I think the facilitators here do well is how do you communicate that value to the community, right? How do you tell them you are part of a computer science experiment? To some level, Miron likes to joke that if you're doing translational medicine, sometimes you have dead patients, right? And sometimes we might have to leave some users for dead as well. But I think if you tell people this upfront, and in fact, when I talk to incoming faculty, I say we're not doing this because we're interested in cost recovery or we're altruistic. We do this because you're going to help us make our science better. Then I think they're maybe usually a little more forgiving about when we deploy the version of Condor with the bug that ate their science paper, these sorts of things.
Yeah, I think, so you mentioned communications, Miron mentioned communication, and I think this is actually the hardest part of doing translational computer science, because you're not talking just to a computer scientist and that are in your domain and they understand what you're trying to say and see the value, but you're talking really to the users, to your potential users. The users have different level of knowledge. So you need to adapt the way you communicate to the knowledge that they have, not only about computer science, but the computing environments. You have to learn about how to communicate. If they're running on their own campuses, you have to understand what environment they're running in. So then obviously you communicate with the funders and broader community, but how do you communicate to these various users, I think is still the most challenging thing for us to do in general.
What occurred to me just then is I think the reason that this community has worked so well with high energy physics is that the physicists are very used to the idea of I have this very unstable, unpredictable thing to which I've soldered a lot of wires, and if it doesn't work right, well, I'm going to go in and tinker with it. And other science communities are not that comfortable on the technology side of things, right? And so I think we've also seen different degrees of maturity of our technology are appealing to different segments of the science community.
Not sure I know either.
No,
I don't have any.
Okay.
I could talk for hours.
In the spirit of of scavenging, I was able to steal the time out of the schedule for this panel, and obviously there's much more to talk about, and I really feel bad that we have a panel and I didn't open it to question from the floor, and maybe, I don't know, if I steal another 5 or 10 minutes, will it be the end of the world? 5, okay. 5, yes, Lauren.
So having been part of this team and seeing this paper come out, I remember my naive non-computer science brain was like, what's the big deal? This is just what we do here. And having, moved on from the team and collaborated back, but engaged more broadly with the world outside of this bubble, I can tell you that it's still very unique. That what I thought was the norm, that was just how you develop computational technologies, is really not embodied in the same spirit as it is here. And so my question is, for the perspective from each of the panelists, which of the things on the frontier for high throughput computing do you think is most important to further moving the needle in the translational impact of these technologies? Which activities, we've heard about several of them, do you think is the most important?
Go ahead.
I think given how pervasive the need for computing is across all areas of science, society, lowering the barriers to access, right, is, I think, probably the biggest need, right, is being able to make it right now, still non-trivial to get your parallel distributed system running on a computer, right? So how do we bring it to a point where it's more usable, more accessible to the broadest community possible? I think that's probably one of the biggest challenge from my perspective.
Manish always gave me a hard time that, your solution is talk to us. And he said, that doesn't scale.
So I think we hear a lot about democratizing computing or making it accessible to people who don't have it. And I think there's a missing piece there because there's a large swath of people who could take advantage of computing, but I don't think the barrier is they can't get to the computing. It's that they don't have the structure or knowledge to take advantage of it. And forgive me, somebody yesterday said one of their great wishes was people would come with a better understanding of the structure of their workflow, or whatever what are the steps? What's the fundamental thing that I'm trying to accomplish? And so I think there's actually a big gap there in how do we lead people down that path? And I don't think that it's CS 101 for everybody. It's something else. The word computational thinking has sort of come and gone. I don't think that's quite it, but there's something there about teaching people what the computation can and can't do and how to think about that parallelism. And that's how we would get to making it more accessible.
Peter, from you as a customer?
I'll just say, well, my first answer is I don't know. I don't know what the next most important thing is, but this question of scaling is actually a really interesting one because the biggest strength of Miron's group and Ewa's group is in fact the come talk to us, right? That dialogue about what you're trying to do, what the problem really is, and how that maps. And I don't know how to scale that. I don't know that it can be scaled. I mean, obviously, the sort of user experience and the usability of Condor and how to get started and Pegasus could always be much better, right? And as a user, it's one of the things I have like 4 clubs I beat the Condor team with, and one of them is the usability club. But there's a point where it's inherently
we usually come to meeting with Peter with helmets.
Yeah, that's right. And then I have to wear a helmet too because they club me back. Anyway, but I think this question of the right question to ask is what parts of the translational computer science relationship between the computer scientists and the community, what parts of that can be scaled? What are and what can't be? And that's actually not something I've seen many people talk about or think about.
There is a question from Ewa.
Yeah, I just wanted to answer Lauren. So you said, we're in a bubble here. And I think that's actually the challenge is how do you communicate outside that bubble, right? To people
without bursting it.
Yes, to people that don't know what's inside, right? Or that the bubble is even there. And so I do think that as computer scientists, we're very nearsighted. So I would love to have enough time to collaborate with folks from communication and marketing and really see how you can get the message that we know is, more technical, translated into something that's more appealing and also more can diffuse better into the community. So that's, I think, the biggest challenge.
So I want to give a chance to the virtual. Yes, Joe.
We have an online question from Frank referring to Brian Bockelman. There's a pattern in CS where people have a good idea, they make a prototype that works, and then they commercialize it. How do you see this from your translational CS lens? Is this a form of translational computer science?
I think I would defer and say it depends. It's not the commercialization or lack of commercialization that makes it translational. I would look for things like, are you turning into a service and that service stays and people are very happy and happily give you subscription fees or buy the software off the shelf at Best Buy or whatever it might be? Or are you continuously trying to evolve, change, and do that feedback loop for the science? So commercial, not commercial, we didn't even touch anything about sustainability. I think my favorite slide from 2023 was Eva's, where she put on all the different funding project, how she funded Pegasus through all the years. That's also another way to sustain. It's not a particularly fun one. But I think that's kind of independent of translational and whether you're doing the research or not doing the research. I think that's one piece of the puzzle or one approach for sustaining.
So I will declare the panel as a success before Tim start using some violin. I will just respond this question before you applaud them, is that going commercial, in my experience, kills the feedback loop. And therefore, in my book, it's not translational.